The few, the faithful for Low Sunday, welcome. Huh? They didn't sound low. No, I agree. So we're going to continue with the Easter theme by looking at kind of what happens next in Luke chapter 24. So if we could have the thing. Yeah, there we go. So that very day, this is the day when they discovered that the tomb is empty. At least the body isn't there. Two of them, we assume, disciples, not amongst the 11, but the other disciples, were going to a village named Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. And they were talking with each other about all these things that had happened. Now, if they were amongst Jesus' followers, and they were still in Jerusalem, that would put them in danger, because if the Jewish authorities, specifically those associated with the temple, had taken out their leader by means of the Romans, then all of the others that were following Jesus would also have been considered a threat. So they've got to get out of town. Now, the others that stayed behind, as we learn, kind of locked themselves in a room for a week. So while they were talking and discussing it together, Jesus himself drew near and went with them. But their eyes were kept from recognizing him. So Jesus starts walking with them, but they don't recognize him, and it would be rude to not say hello. So they're talking as they're walking. Now, about the whole, they didn't recognize him. One of the things that you'll find, if you've ever read like the ends of all of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, is that you've probably noticed that Jesus after the resurrection is really weird. Like, it's just strange because he's clearly physical. Like, my favorite one is he's like sitting on the shore of Galilee just making breakfast. Like, hey guys, you hungry? And other times he like just appears in a room, but he's obviously physical, and later we'll find that he actually breaks bread. You can't do that without a body. So when we talk resurrection, we mean bodies, but there's something special, something unique, something strange going on here. So they don't recognize him, and they apparently, we would have expected them to. So if we could, thanks. It's weird just staring at me like that. And he said to them, "What is this conversation that you are holding with each other as you walk?" And they stood still. They stopped walking, and they looked sad. It's like, they're talking about something. Hey, what you guys talking about? Well, we are talking about some really bad news. They become depressed because what they were talking about obviously impacted them in a certain way. And so they said, there we go, yeah. I also just noticed a bald spot. That's great. Yeah, all right, I'm just going to go home. Then one of them, named Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only visitor to Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened there in these days?" In other words, everybody's talking about it. It wasn't entirely uncommon for the Romans to crucify a Jew. That happened, but I guess when you combine the events that happened in the temple, so Jesus comes into town, and with a flourish he overturns the money-changing tables, which kind of stops the sacrifice system a little bit, and he's teaching, and he's got this following, and then late at night, he's betrayed, he's grabbed, he's crucified. I mean, that's good gossip. That's juicy stuff. That's Maury Povich material or something like that. And so they're like, "Are you the only one that knew?" Or the only one that doesn't know what's going on? And he said to them, what things? And they said to him, concerning Jesus of Nazareth, a man who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and rulers, and the chief priests, especially the high priest and the Roman authorities, were in cahoots and had been for quite some time, delivered him up to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. So Israel had already been redeemed once. It's the event that actually everybody had just celebrated in Jerusalem, the event of the Passover. And in fact, God, through his prophets, reminds his people constantly, remember, you were slaves in Egypt, and I redeemed you out of that slavery. So for them to use that kind of language, we had hoped he would be the one to redeem Israel. They're drawing on the symbolism and the meaning of rescue. That they were hoping that Jesus would be the one to bring justice, because they were living within a world that is full of injustice. They had high hopes for Jesus. And it's hard to blame them. I mean, we look at the world around us, and we see a world full of injustice. We long for rescue, for redemption. And it was the same for them. And so they had hope. So they're drawing on that Passover, that Egypt language. And they said, yes, and besides all this, it is the third day since these things happened. Moreover, some women of our company amazed us. They were at the tomb early in the morning, and when they did not find his body, they came back saying that they had even seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. Okay, ancient world, ancient culture, fairly conservative culture. Women were not considered credible sources. All right? Now, I'm not saying that, that's how we should view things at all. Look, Kurt, don't go there. No. So it would be, first off, it's just weird that all of the Gospels agree that the women were the first to see. That if you're trying to build a case for the resurrection of Jesus, that's not how you should have done it. Which makes you think, well, maybe that's actually how it happened. And oddly enough, when Paul talks about Jesus appearing after he was raised from the dead, he actually does not mention the women. He's kind of glossed that over, saying, look, guys, that story's not helping. A very, very weird give and take. But he's saying, okay, so these women amazed us because they went and there is no body in the tomb. And they had this vision of angels. And they don't know what to make of it. And if you read the other Gospels and their accounts of the resurrection, they have a ton of similarities, but they struggle with the details. Like, okay, was it like one guy sitting where the head should be, or were there angels, and what did the angels say, and how many angels were there, how many women were there, was it this one, and you get this sense, and a very famous historian and theologian once put it, that the gospel writers, as they are writing about the resurrection, do not possess the language to make sense of what happened. Because it was so out of what they expected, so beyond their hopes, that as they're piecing these stories together and talking about, okay, so what did you see, and what did you see, and is that what they said? They're struggling to explain what had happened. It's like the birth of your first child. Like you can talk about how what a gory event that really is, and there's lots of screaming, and it was mainly me, and you know, and, and then there's pushing, and then there's counting, and then there's doctors, and then this thing comes out, and then another thing comes out after that, which was really weird. It was like, okay. But it was kind of neat because the doctor pulled it up and showed the sack, and like, this is the amniotic sac, and I'm like, that's a funny word. And this baby comes out, and he's like covered in cream cheese, and then there's this tube coming out of the stomach, and it's remarkably hard to cut. It took me 2 cuts, and my brother's a doctor. I said, "Is that normal?" He goes, "Yeah, that thing's slippery." And then all of a sudden you realize there's this kid, and he's crying, and for the only time in your life that crying doesn't bother you, and you know that nothing is the same. Everything changes after that. And you get this sense that as these earliest Christians are trying to come to terms with what it means for Jesus to be alive, for there to be a body standing in front of them, but then also to suddenly have that body gone. And wait, we never expected him to rise like that. He was supposed to maybe rise like on the last day when everybody is raised from the dead. And he talks to Peter, and he forgives Peter for denying he ever knew him. And how do you make sense of this? So you get the sense that these two people, Cleopas, we know, we're not sure who that other one is. They're talking and trying to make sense of everything that had happened. They had these huge hopes for Jesus, and then he's dead, but then we're just getting really weird reports that his body's gone, and no one knows where it is. Something funny is going on. So they continue talking. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but him they did not see. So, of course, the men, well, we've got to verify what these women are saying. Again, ancient culture. I'm not, for or against that. And he said to them, they're saying they verified that there was no body. We still don't know what to make sense of it. And then Jesus says, "O foolish ones, and slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Was it not necessary that the Messiah should suffer these things and enter into his glory?" Kind of a rhetorical question, because you get the sense that these 2 disciples would say, I was it? I don't know. And so, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, and that's the fancy word, if you want to sound smart, the word is metonymy. It's a way of talking about all the Bible, all the scriptures. He interpreted to them in all the scriptures the things concerning himself. So they drew near to the village to which they were going. He acted as if he were going farther. I guess Jesus has a flair for the dramatic. But they urged him strongly. They almost forced him. "Stay with us, for it is toward the evening, and the day is now far spent." So he went in to stay with them. In this culture, hospitality is absolutely critical. If they had just let this guy continue his journey at night, which was extremely dangerous, then the shame actually would have been on them. They were the ones that did not offer hospitality to this guy. So they made sure that they were doing their duty, and they looked after him and took care of him. So when he was at the table with them, he took the bread and blessed it and broke it and gave it to them. Now that's odd. Okay, here's why. They invite him into their house. Who's the host? Probably Cleopas. What is the duty of the host? It's the duty of the host to break the bread and bless it and and hand it out. So Jesus is like taking that role from them. This is a bold kind of momentarily awkward move. It's like if you invite me over for dinner, and then all of a sudden I say, all right, it's time for dinner, and I grab the dishes and put it out and sit at the head of the table. Probably the last time you'll have me over. It's just kind of weird. So Jesus takes this initiative, he blesses it, he breaks the bread, an obvious allusion to when he broke the bread and said, "This is my body." And their eyes were opened and they recognized him. Their eyes were opened and they recognized. You can also translate it's epigeneson. It's their eyes were opened and they knew. Epigeneson auton. It's there's one other time, one very prominent time, when their eyes were opened and they knew. And it's in Genesis 3. When the man and the woman in the Garden of Eden eat of the knowledge of good and evil, and it says their eyes were opened and they knew they were naked. It was the moment of their loss of innocence. But in this case, their eyes were opened and they recognized him. Their eyes were opened and they knew. It's the regaining of innocence. It's drawing to a close that curse that has held us all for a very, very long time. And so he vanished from their sight. Again, the resurrected Jesus is weird. And then they said to each other, "Did not our hearts burn within us while he talked to us on the road, while he opened to us the scriptures?" Now, I've been puzzling over this and meditating on it and trying to understand it as best I can. Because what did they mean when they said, "Were not our hearts burning?" And so I asked myself, okay, when does my heart really burn? I mean, for starters, if I eat too much Cajun food, I still do, but you just pay for it later. Your heart burns when you miss something. Like if I'm, on my way to work, or I'm driving somewhere, and or I'm, working on something elsewhere, and I see a kid run along with a family, and it looks like they're having fun. Sometimes my heart will burn a little. I miss Nash. I want to go home and play with him. I want to play with my family and spend time with them, but I can't. I'm working. I'm longing for something that I don't currently have, something that I miss. Certain memories will maybe cause us to remember somebody that we miss, somebody that we want to see. We think, I should really call my parents. Or, hey, I haven't talked to John in 6 months. Let's catch up. Our hearts burn when we remember. And when that or that memory builds up a desire within us. Our hearts also burn when we encounter something and we know that things should be better. There's something funny about the human experience that as we go through life, and as it turns out, life can be enormously hard. That somehow we know in our bones life should be better than this. That the injustice we experience, the heartache, the loss, the struggles in relationships, the struggles with the people around us, with the world being the way it is, we just know that it shouldn't be like this. It should be better. And our hearts burn. This is why we are capable of such amazing, what we might call humanitarian efforts. Because people say that, it's not all right that children are starving. Not just abroad, but here in the United States, their hearts burn, and that burn motivates them to change. And I think for these two disciples, their hearts burning within them as Jesus is explaining the scriptures to them, it's a combination of those experiences. They remember spending time with Jesus. They remember what that was like. And even though they didn't recognize him, they remember that feeling of having their eyes opened to the story that God is telling them. And at the same time, the story that God is telling them is that, yes, this world is not as it should be, but one day it will be. And so their hearts are stirred with passion for what God intended life to truly be, to fully live as someone who is fully human. And when they encounter Jesus, raised from the dead, they know that they don't just encounter God incarnate, even though that is true. They also encounter for the first time one who is truly and fully human. And their heart burns because they know that this is how even they one day will be. And so it continues. And they rose that same hour and returned to Jerusalem. And they found the 11 and those who were with them gathered together, saying, "The Lord has risen indeed and has appeared to Simon." Then they told what had happened on the road, and now he was known to them in the breaking of the bread. And so I'll leave you with this, that as we live out the human existence, and as we followers of Jesus have become and are becoming more truly, fully alive human beings, that this same Jesus who walked on the road to these disciples who clearly did not get it, who called out of their hearts this desire and this passion that says, I am not how I should be, the world is not how it should be, but I know one day it will be, that this same Jesus now is revealed in the breaking of the bread and the pouring of the wine. That as we commune, we're not just being cute when we say that Jesus said, "This is my body, this is my blood." That the same presence of Jesus is here with us now. And so may your hearts burn within you as you encounter the resurrected Christ, fully present in the bread and in the wine. And may he call out of your hearts that burning desire and that knowledge that he is making you more fully and truly human. Amen.